In most states across the US, you'll find a single city that stands out as the largest and most dominant. Think New York City in New York, Chicago in Illinois, or Portland, Oregon. But Alabama is a strange case. It's one of the very few states where it's an exception. Here, the population is almost evenly spread out among arguably 4 major cities: Huntsville, Montgomery, Birmingham, and Mobile. If we were to look at just how evenly distributed they are, it'd look like this. From most populated to least, there's Huntsville at 215,000, Montgomery at 200,000, Birmingham at 197,000, and Mobile at 187,000. They're all pretty close to each other, with differences from the most populated to the least at only 28,000 people. If you were to look at all their metro populations, they're almost all pretty similar-ish too, which we'll get into later. But why is this the case? What makes Alabama one of these few exceptions? Well, it's a combination of history, geography, and luck. Let me explain. If we were to go back to the earliest days of Alabama, back when it first started to become colonized, we can start to see how some of these 4 cities started to gain traction. It began with the French settlement of Mobile, located in southwestern Alabama, or more specifically on Alabama's Gulf Coast. Obviously, there were many Native American groups there before, and even Spanish explorers too, but when the French came in 1702, they really kickstarted it. It was founded as Fort Louis de Louisiane, the capital of colonial French Louisiana. The main factor leading to its founding was that France soon realized that in order to counter English and Spanish influence in the region and protect Louisiana and the Mississippi River, they needed a fort on the Gulf of Mexico. Mobile quickly grew into a bustling colonial outpost, serving as the political and military center of French Louisiana. Its strategic location on the Gulf Coast meant that over time, it became a center for trade as well. When the French ceded control of the region to the British in 1763 after the 7 Years' War, Mobile continued to prosper under British rule, further establishing itself as a key port. The city changed hands again to the Spanish in 1780, before finally becoming part of the United States in 1813, just before Alabama achieved statehood in 1819. Throughout these transitions, Mobile remained Alabama's primary gateway to the world. Its location tied to the Mobile River system that served as the principal navigational access for most of Alabama and a large part of Mississippi. River transportation was aided by the introduction of steamboats in the early decades of the 19th century, and that's where we truly start to see the city's population boom. Along with this, a lot of the land in the vicinity of the Mobile River is well suited to growing cotton, and at the same time, the Industrial Revolution in Britain created shortages of it, driving up prices on world markets. Naturally, a plantation economy using slave labor developed in the region, and as a consequence, Mobile's population quickly grew further. From the 1830s onward, Mobile expanded into a city of commerce, with a primary focus on the cotton and slave trades. Many slaves were transported by ship in the coastwise slave trade from the Upper South. The exports of cotton kept growing with it. By 1840, Mobile was second only to New Orleans in cotton exports in the nation, and was the slave trading center of the state till 1850, when Montgomery took over, but we'll get into that next. If we look at Mobile today, it's still extremely relevant thanks to their port. In fact, it's the only deep water port in all of Alabama, and as of January 2024, was ranked second in the United States for fastest growth over the last decade by Forbes. It brought in not only shipbuilding as a major industry there, but also aerospace engineering, with Airbus choosing to set up an assembly plant there, with one of the major reasons being port access. Now, like I said earlier, from 1850, Montgomery took over as the slave trading center of the state. But how it got to this point is directly related with why it's still very populated today, in a unique, albeit simple story. For the most part of the 1700s and the early 1800s, the region remained largely under Native American control, particularly from the Muskogee Nation, with some European powers contesting it too. When American settlers started moving in, they began clashing with the Muskogee, which resisted the encroachment on their land. These tensions culminated in the Creek War of 1813 to 1814, which was part of the larger conflict of the War of 1812. After the defeat of the Muskogee Nation, they were forced to cede 22 million acres of land, primarily in southern Georgia and central Alabama, including what would become Montgomery, to the US in the Treaty of Fort Jackson. From here, settlers quickly moved onto the land, which lies on the fertile Alabama River Valley, This is part of what was known as the Alabama Fever, the land rush occurring after 1817 to establish claims on the Black Belt, a region of Alabama rich in black soil developed for cotton plantation agriculture. It was kinda like California's gold rush for comparison. In 1819, two towns were founded near each other on the banks of the Alabama River, New Philadelphia and East Alabama, which ended up merging into what we know as Montgomery today. Now, if we want to talk about why Montgomery grew so much, especially after its relatively late start compared to somewhere like Mobile, it has to do with its geographical location. And no, I'm not just talking about it being along the Alabama River, rather its literal geographical positioning in Alabama. See, the first capital of the newly created US state was a city known as Cahaba, but due to its lowland location at the convergence of two large rivers, the Alabama River and the Cahaba River, the town was subject to seasonal flooding, and the mosquitoes from the swamps spread numerous diseases, giving the town the reputation of being unhealthy and dangerous. As a result, the capital was moved to Tuscaloosa in 1826, before finally being moved to Montgomery in 1846. As for why Montgomery, well, look at it. Not only is it situated along the Alabama River, which provided a crucial transportation route for cotton headed to Mobile's port for export, but it's quite literally in the center of Alabama, or at least the south-central area of it, which was more important. Along with this, if we relay a map of the Black Belt over it, you'll see it falls under the area too. The city's central location made it an ideal processing hub and market for the booming cotton trade, attracting planters and merchants alike, which led to the state leading in cotton production by 1840, and eventually becoming the epicenter of Alabama's slave trade by 1850. Becoming the capital of Alabama was key to everything, though being the state capital means cementing its role as a political and administrative center. The influx of government workers and associated services helped stabilize its population growth over time. And if you look at Montgomery today, that still holds true, though with some caveats we'll get to later. The state government is the second largest employer in Montgomery by far, behind only the Maxwell Air Force Base, which has so many jobs given it's the headquarters of Air University, a major component of the Air Education and Training Command. Apart from that, the rich cultural and historical significance of Montgomery, being a major trade center of events and protests during the civil rights movements, attracts people too. The next major city that boomed after Montgomery was Birmingham, which today easily has the biggest metro population in all of Alabama, at over 1.1 million, with more than twice that of the next largest, Huntsville. Its story is a bit more humbling though. Born out of the post-Civil War industrial boom, also known as the Second Industrial Revolution, the city was originally just a plot of land bought by the Ellington Land Company in 1871, who saw it as an opportunity to capitalize on the area's location for two main reasons. The first being that it was the site of the intersection of two major railroads, the Alabama and Chattanooga Railroad, and the South and North Alabama Railroad, so it offered a critical transportation network that would support industry and trade. The second, being even more important, was that it was near large deposits of coal, iron ore, and limestone, the three main raw materials for steel production. In fact, Birmingham is the only place worldwide where significant amounts of all three minerals can be found in close proximity. Naturally, the company began promoting Birmingham as an industrial hub, and its rise was rapid. Steel was in incredible demand, obviously, and its production there turned Birmingham into the industrial center of the South. The pace of Birmingham's growth during the period from 1881 through 1920 earned its nickname the Magic City, as the downtown area developed from a low-rise commercial and residential district into a busy grid of neoclassical mid-rise and high-rise buildings and busy streetcar lines. By this time, Birmingham had also grown into Alabama's largest city, attracting workers from rural areas and other states, all fueled by steel production and related industries. Today, having the benefit of being the largest metro population, Birmingham's economy soaks up all the natural benefits of that. It's the banking center of Alabama, and at one point was even the 10th largest banking center in the US back in 2014. It has the largest healthcare sector in Alabama, and of course, it still retains a vast steel sector too. And lastly, we have Huntsville, Alabama, located very up north of the state. The irony of this city is that of these four cities, it's the second oldest, being founded in 1805, and yet it developed last. To cut its history a bit short, After the US negotiated treaties with the Chickasaw and Cherokee people to cede their claims to the federal government, the area was subsequently purchased by Leroy Pope, who named it Twickenham, before it being renamed Huntsville in 1811. Initially, Huntsville's growth was based on wealth generated by the sale of cotton from cotton mills, but it was still a relatively small city, with a population of just 13,000. Everything changed though in 1941, when the US Army selected 35,000 acres of land adjoining the southwest area of the city for building 3 chemical munitions facilities: the Huntsville Arsenal, the Redstone Arsenal, and the Gulf Chemical Warfare Depot. These operated throughout World War II, with combined personnel approaching 20,000. Resources in the area were strained, as new workers flocked to the area, and the construction of housing couldn't keep up. Then the Korean War started. The Redstone Arsenal was given the mission to develop what eventually became the Redstone rocket, which set the stage for the United States space program, as well as major Army missile programs, to be centered in Huntsville. Finally, in 1960, the Redstone Arsenal was turned into NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, headed by the infamous Wernher von Braun, and the rest is history. Today, Huntsville continues to grow as a hub for aerospace, defense, and technology industries, making it one of the fastest growing cities in Alabama, and giving it the nickname the Rocket City. What's interesting is that despite each of these cities' individual strengths, none of them ever completely overshadowed the others, largely due to Alabama's diverse geography and economy. They each just developed a specialized economic base, whether that be Mobile as the trade and shipping hub, Montgomery as the political and administrative capital, Birmingham as the industry and finance hub, and Huntsville as the defense and aerospace hub. They all just balance each other out. Well, kinda. Like I said earlier, if we look at metro populations, there's an outlier. For example, Huntsville, which is technically the largest city in Alabama by population proper, has a metro population of about 515,000, while Mobile's is at 411,000 and Montgomery's is at 385,000. These are all in pretty similar ranges, but then there's Birmingham at 1.1 million people, though some put that number even higher. But why is this the case? Well, 2 main things. Historically, Birmingham was larger and more densely populated than the other cities, so when the decline of the steel industry and the civil rights movement began, it combined to affect it the most. Let me explain. While Montgomery may be where civil rights movements began and is seen as the more notable place for it, Birmingham was arguably the most violent place to be. This violent unrest contributed to more intense fear and racial polarization in Birmingham, leading to rapid and widespread white flight. When you combine this with the steel industry declining, it encouraged suburbanization, leading to the growth of Birmingham's suburban areas. These suburbs expanded the overall metro population, even as the central city faced challenges. So the result is that Birmingham has a much larger metro population than other cities in Alabama, where suburbanization was less extensive, and the core cities didn't face the same level of industrial decline and flight. And yes, while Montgomery was a central battleground for civil rights, the conflicts weren't as violent, and Montgomery's economy was tied to the state government, which was more stable and less affected by industrial decline, making it less likely for people to leave in large numbers. Now, while Huntsville, Mobile, Montgomery, and Birmingham's city populations may all be similar at this moment in time, some say it's more so coincidental and won't last for too much longer. This is because Mobile and Montgomery are dropping a lot in population, especially Montgomery, which lost 1,657 people in 2023 alone, the largest drop in all Alabama's cities, while Huntsville continues to grow rapidly. So who knows what these dynamics may look like in a few decades. It's interesting though, nevertheless, and when you think about it, only Ohio really is similar in this regard to Alabama, with Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland kinda being the same deal. But that's a story for another time. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more content just like this. I'll see you in the next one.